So, I want to start today with a document that, I mean, if it's real, it kind of ruins one of my favorite heroes. We're looking at a text called The Lamp at Noon.
It is a heavy text.
Ugh.
And you're right, it really threatens to uh, dismantle a very specific pedestal we've built.
Because when you think of Diogenes the Cynic, you're usually thinking of, like, the punk rocker of philosophy, right?
Totally.
The guy living in a wine barrel, barking at people, telling Alexander the Great to get out of his sunlight. He's the ultimate symbol of not caring what anyone thinks.
That is the myth, the unshakable rebel. But this manuscript, it presents a totally different person. It claims to be a lost personal journal from Diogenes himself, written, right at the very end of his life.
And in it, he's what? Not the hero we thought.
Well, it introduces us to a man who is just riddled with anxiety, who feels like a complete frog, and who is terrified that his entire life of rebellion was actually just a performance.
Wow, that is a devastating idea. I mean, if Diogenes wasn't authentic, then who the heck is? But before we get into that, let's look at the text itself. It's titled The Lamp at Noon. What's the context there?
So the famous story is that Diogenes carried a lit lamp in broad daylight, looking for an honest man.
Right, it was a stunt.
It was a stunt to show that no one was truly virtuous. But in this text, he's sort of reinterpreting that. He's writing these entries while he's dying. He's in pain. He can't really move. And he's looking back at all his stunts, the barrel, the lamp, and wondering if he was just doing it for the applause.
He's questioning if he was a philosopher or just an actor in a really, really dirty costume.
That's it exactly.
Hmm.
And that's really the mission of this deep dive. We want to explore that specific question. Can a human being ever truly be authentic? Or are we all, inevitably just playing a role?
Okay, so let's jump into the manuscript. It's broken into these different reflections, and right off the bat, he just destroys this romantic idea of renouncing the world. He writes about an encounter with this young, wealthy fan.
Oh, this scene is brutal. Diogenes describes a young, perfumed philosopher who comes up to him, just beaming with pride.
Okay.
And this kid announces that he's given away his entire inheritance to the temple so he can pursue wisdom, just like Diogenes. He's even wearing these designer rags. They're perfectly messy.
I can just picture this kid. He's waiting for the slow clap. He wants the master to say, "Welcome to the club."
But Diogenes doesn't clap. He laughs in his face. He asks the boy, "So you gave your corruption to the priests to manage. How generous."
Okay, but hold on. Isn't that a little harsh? I mean, the kid did give away the money. Isn't that what matters?
You think so?
Yeah.
But not to Diogenes, not in this manuscript. He sees it as a transaction. He tells the boy, "You cannot sacrifice what was never yours."
What does he mean by that?
He argues that the boy hasn't actually given up wealth. He's just exchanged it. He traded gold coins for spiritual coins.
Spiritual currency.
Right. If you give away money so that you can feel superior to others, you're still hoarding something. You're hoarding virtue. You're hoarding this feeling of being the special pious guy.
So the ego is still the center of the universe. You're just feeding it a different diet.
It's even more central. And this is where the imposter syndrome really kicks in for Diogenes. Because he looks at this kid posing in his fancy rags, performing poverty, and he suddenly looks at his own barrel. And he has this terrified thought, am I doing the same thing?
He thinks his barrel is a prop.
He calls it a monument. He actually writes, I have built a more interesting cage than my neighbors. And that line it really stuck with me.
The idea that he hasn't escaped society, he's just created a museum exhibit called The Man Who Escaped Society.
Yes. And he admits his famous lamp has become a logo. People aren't looking at the light anymore. They're looking at the lamp. They're looking at the brand Diogenes.
And once you become an icon, you're no longer a person, you're a product.
And products can't be authentic.
Speaking of products, there's this incredible section next where he's watching a merchant in the marketplace. But this guy isn't selling, olives or pottery. He's selling maps of virtue.
Topographies of the soul.
That sounds like something I'd get a targeted ad for on social media today.
It really does. So Diogenes watches this woman buy a map called The Complete Topography of the Virtuous Soul. And he just can't help himself. He heckles her. He asks if she's arrived at virtue yet.
And she gets all defensive, right? She says she has responsibilities. She can't just go live in a barrel like him.
Right. But Diogenes hits on something really profound here. He critiques this obsession.
Which we definitely still have.
Oh, absolutely. This obsession with the map of the good life, rather than the actual movement through life.
It's like buying a travel guide for Paris and feeling like you've been to Paris just because you read the book.
Exactly. Or reading a book on how to be happy and thinking you've somehow solved happiness. Diogenes argues that the good life isn't a destination you navigate to, it's a quality of traveling.
But then he spots the irony, doesn't he?
Immediately. He realizes he's writing these thoughts down. He's making a map.
He's making his own map.
He admits it to the reader. He says, I am writing a map. And he kind of laughs at his own hypocrisy.
Yeah.
He realizes that even his critique of the system is still part of the system.
There's no outside.
No.
Hmm.
Even his nakedness is defined by the clothes he refuses to wear.
It seems like he's trapped in this loop of self-awareness, which I guess brings us to the most famous story about him, the Alexander the Great moment.
Stand out of my sun.
In the legend, this is the ultimate power move. But in this manuscript, Diogenes admits something. Well, something kind of scandalous.
He admits he liked it.
He liked the attention.
He writes that while Alexander was performing ultimate power, Diogenes was performing ultimate indifference. He says, we both played our roles adequately. But secretly? He enjoyed it. He questions who was the bigger fraud, Alexander or himself.
That reframes the entire interaction. It wasn't a philosopher speaking truth to power.
It was two actors on a stage. It was a symbiotic relationship. Alexander needs the rebel to show how magnanimous he is. If I were not Alexander, I would be Diogenes.
And Diogenes needs the king to validate his rebellion.
Right. If nobody cares that you're in a barrel, are you really rebelling?
Which leads him to his obsession with dogs. We know he was called the dog, but here he explains why the dog is the superior being.
And it comes back to that self-awareness loop. He observes that dogs are authentic because they don't try to be dogs. A dog eats, it fights, it has no shame, doesn't have a story about itself.
It just is.
Exactly. And Diogenes says humans are cursed because we are the animal that can be inauthentic. We're the only creature that can perform being a creature.
So even when he acts like a dog eating garbage, living on the street, he's not actually like a dog because he's doing it on purpose.
Precisely. He can never be the dog because he is aware of trying to be the dog. The dog doesn't have an ego watching the dog, but Diogenes does. So his conclusion is fascinating. He decides it's better to perform honesty consciously than to perform nobility unconsciously.
In other words, if you're going to be an actor, at least admit you're on stage.
Yes. Don't pretend the costume is your skin. It's the only way out of the trap.
Okay, so up to this point, Diogenes sounds very theoretical, but then the manuscript shifts. We get to a section called The Education of the Young, and we meet a girl named Thea, and this is where this new Diogenes really shocked me.
This is a pivotal moment. Thea's 16. She's in a terrible spot. She's being forced to marry an old, wealthy man, but she's in love with another 16-year-old and wants to run away with him.
And she comes to Diogenes, the great rebel, expecting him to say, follow your heart, reject the system.
That's what you'd expect. Live free or die. But he doesn't say that.
No, he completely dismantles her romantic idealism. This is the part that actually made me angry for a second.
I get it. It sounds awful, doesn't it? But look at his reasoning. He tells her that if she runs away with a teenage boy with no money and no skills, she'll be starving in a month and dead in 3. He calls it suicide with extra steps.
So what's his alternative?
Cold, hard strategy, he tells her. Marry the old man.
But not just surrender. He tells her to infiltrate.
Yes. He says, marry him. Secure his wealth, make yourself indispensable through competence, run the estate, manage the accounts, play the long game, and eventually you'll gain your freedom through widowhood.
Wow. So he tells her to become a strategist.
And here is the key line from the text that flips the whole thing. Purity is a luxury of the powerful.
Oof. Okay. Let's unpack that one.
Diogenes is realizing that he can afford to be uncompromising. He can spit at kings because he's an old man with nothing left to lose. She's a young woman with everything to lose.
So for him to push his brand of rebellion on her would actually be an act of violence.
It would. So the most compassionate thing he can do is help her survive. It shows the difference between simple truth, which is his brand, and easy living, which doesn't exist for her.
He breaks character to save her life.
And speaking of breaking character, the manuscript shifts again. The tone just completely changes. We move from these intellectual debates to something very, very physical. Diogenes is dying.
The section on the body's wisdom.
He describes a tumor in his gut. The pain is getting worse every day. And he discovers something, well, profound.
Right.
You can't perform pain.
Pain is the one thing you can't philosophize your way out of. When you hurt, you just hurt.
He writes that as the pain increases, philosophy fails. The body just refuses to be narrated. But he finds a strange kind of freedom in that. There's a moment he just stops his performance to rest in the sun. He says he finally achieves a moment of non-performance because he's just too tired to maintain the character of Diogenes.
He's just an old animal dying in the sun.
And in that vulnerability, he finally lets someone in. We meet Xanthi, the herb seller.
I loved Xanthi. She's the only one who doesn't seem to buy his act.
Not at all. She brings him soup. She brings him poppy extract for the pain. And notice the dynamics. She doesn't ask for wisdom. She just sees a man who's hurting, and she helps him.
And Diogenes realizes he isn't the self-sufficient island he pretended to be. He needs care.
He calls it small mattering. His whole life was about cosmic truths, right? But in the end, the thing that actually sustains him is this small, specific connection. He realizes that cosmic significance is a fantasy. Real life is just local.
It brings us to the end. He's facing death. And you'd think he would go out with a bang, a final protest.
But he doesn't. He thinks about suicide using the poppy, but he delays it. Not out of fear, but out of simple curiosity. He wants to see how the play ends naturally.
Still the observer, right to the end.
He is, but the pretension is gone. He tells a young philosopher that because the universe is absurd, you're free. If there's no grand script, you can write your own small meanings.
And then the pain is too much. He accepts the final dose from Xanthi. His final thoughts. They aren't about his legacy, are they?
Well, he struggles. He admits he wanted his writing to survive. He calls it his last vanity. But he accepts it probably won't. His final advice in the text isn't some grand theory. It's a plea for awareness. He says, just look at what is in front of you.
Just let it be what it is. That's the note they found at the end.
It's the ultimate anti-philosophy. After all the arguments, all the barking, all the performing, he just arrives at simple acceptance.
So if we look at this whole journey, from the guy barking at Alexander to the old man accepting soup from a friend, what's the big takeaway? We aren't living in barrels? Hopefully?
I think the lesson is about the danger of our own performances. We all have a barrel. We all have a role we play, the good employee, the cool parent, the rebel.
And we spend so much energy polishing that prop.
And Diogenes is saying, don't mistake the role for the person. And more importantly, don't let the role keep you from that small mattering. Don't be so busy performing success that you miss the actual texture of your life.
Authenticity isn't about being wild or shocking. It's just about noticing when you're acting and maybe, just for a few minutes, dropping the act.
Even if it's just to admit you're tired or you need help, that might be the only real rebellion left.
Security is a luxury of the powerful. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time.
It's a haunting text. It leaves you with less certainty, but maybe more honesty.
And that seems like a good place to leave it. So here is our challenge to you, the listener, for the rest of the day. Identify one area in your life where you're performing a role, maybe at work, maybe on social media.
Maybe even with your family.
And ask yourself, what would happen if I dropped the act for just 1 hour? Would the world end? Or would you just be free?
Try it and see.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.